The decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us here in Europe, and also for us specifically in Germany. It no longer truly exists in the same way that we once knew it. And nostalgia won't help either. And I would be one of the last people not to gladly indulge in that nostalgia. But it doesn't help. That's just how it is. The Americans are now pursuing their own interests very, very forcefully. Yes, we are not at war, but we are also no longer living solely in peace. And we need to be clear about that. In any case, I am not willing to prioritize environmental and climate protection so highly that a large part of our industrial core in the Federal Republic of Germany is lost as a result. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, if you truly want to damage, if not completely destroy, democracy in Germany, the decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us here in Europe, and also for us specifically in Germany. It no longer truly exists in the same way that we once knew it. And nostalgia won't help either. And I would be one of the last people not to gladly indulge in that nostalgia. But it doesn't help. That's just how it is. The Americans are now pursuing their own interests very, very forcefully. Yes, we are not at war, but we are also no longer living solely in peace. And we need to be clear about that, if we do it at the expense of our industry. In any case, I am not willing to prioritize environmental and climate protection so highly that a large part of our industrial core in the Federal Republic of Germany is lost as a result. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, if you truly want to damage, if not completely destroy, democracy in Germany, then you just have to keep on doing exactly that. I am not willing to let people who are far left, or even more so, far right, now calling themselves the so-called alternative for Germany, take this mission away from us, my dear friends. We will absolutely not allow that to happen, and they will clearly see just how incredibly ready we are to valiantly fight for what we have painstakingly achieved in our beloved country and for the profound legacy that we proudly hold in our hands today.
Dear Markus Söder, dear Edmund Stoiber, dear Theo Weigel, dear Alexander Hoffmann, dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, from the federal government, the Bavarian state government, the European Parliament, the German Bundestag, the Bavarian state parliament, dear friends and supporters of the CSU, thank you very much for the warm welcome at the CSU. I feel at home here. Thank you very much for this warm welcome. I am truly delighted to be here with all of you today. In my significant role as the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, leading a dedicated federal cabinet that proudly includes 3 strong and highly capable CSU ministers, I extend my warmest greetings. But, dear friends, the most important thing is, after just 3.5 years in opposition, the union of CDU and CSU is once again forming the federal government. And we have achieved this goal together. In February, we have been entrusted with the sole responsibility of governing, and indeed we truly know what that profound responsibility means. We took office in exceptionally challenging times, and we know that we have many issues to address, many problems to solve that have existed in Germany for a long time. Far too long, they have remained unresolved. But dear friends, not only the federal election, but also the previous European election, the last state election in Bavaria and in other states of the Federal Republic of Germany, as well as local elections, are important elections. As committed Europeans, it was not easy for us to control borders. We have stood for this, and we still do, for being an open space of freedom and law, a single market of free movement. But if this European Union does not manage to effectively control its external borders, if what we have set out to achieve together in this European Union with the various regulations, the so-called Dublin regulations, if all of that does not succeed, then a state, then a government, first and foremost, has the duty to protect its own territory, to protect its own people, and to ensure that this problem does not grow beyond all measure, and that we are still able to solve it, at least to some extent. That is our task, just as every other government in Europe also sees it as their task, regards it. The second priority we set for ourselves, even before the parliamentary summer break, was to make the first decisions. with regard to the ongoing structural weakness of our economy. And dear friends, let there be no deception and no illusions here either. For more than 10 years, our economy has been stagnating. For more than 10 years, we have not had any significant growth. For more than 10 years, we have been falling behind in various technologies around the world. And at the same time, for more than 10 years, social spending in all its various forms has been rising disproportionately, just as our welfare state looks today. So that this is also clear, we want to preserve this welfare state. We want people to feel safe in our country, that they can truly rely on this welfare state in times of illness, old age, or when they need care. But ladies and gentlemen, that requires that this welfare state remains financially viable and above all, that we generate the economic performance that makes all of this possible in the first place. Without growth, without employment, without the future viability of our economy, nothing will succeed in the area of social policy. And the very first to suffer from this will not be the wealthy, will not be those who can afford all of this on their own. The first to suffer from a welfare state that is no longer financially viable are those who need it the most. And that is why we, as the CDU and CSU, stand now and especially on the side of the vulnerable, those who need this state, this welfare state. But when we see in the labor market that despite a need for skilled workers, despite significant gaps in employment, many people have chosen instead to enter the transfer systems, preferring to receive citizens' benefits rather than go to work, then we have to correct that. This is not a dismantling or erosion of the welfare state, but rather a focus of the welfare state on its true core purpose. Because that is the core, that those who are able to work should indeed work in Germany, and not simply rely on the support of our welfare state. That is our idea of a welfare state that truly works. And then, dear friends, it is essential to restore the competitiveness of our economy, which we have lost and which, in many areas, no longer exists. Yes, there are encouraging signs. There are young entrepreneurs, young companies. There are one or two promising models of new businesses. But overall, it is not enough. Overall, we are falling behind. We started with energy policy. We have made 3 decisions that are taking effect and are already visible now. They're tangible. With the gas storage levy, with the grid fees, with the electricity tax. All in all, that's a relief of 10 billion euros next year. Even now, the advance payment notices from the municipal utilities are being adjusted downward, on average by 9% for every household. That's something, but it's not enough yet. And that's why we've decided we need a power plant strategy and we need an industrial electricity price. And those who were there last Wednesday, in the night from Wednesday to Thursday, when we had our last coalition committee meeting, Business, the Federal Minister for Economic Affairs was there. The approval in Brussels for what we intend to do with the industrial electricity price, with the electricity cap, cost limitation, and with the power plant strategy is close to being granted. And we will also build power plants again in Germany, specifically gas-fired power plants that are not hydrogen-ready from day one. These power plants do not exist, and this hydrogen does not exist yet either. And unlike the previous government, we will not wait for that. We are doing it now, because we need baseload-capable power generation in Germany. And we need it now, not at some point in the future when enough hydrogen technology is available. And then there's the tiresome, never-ending topic of bureaucracy. We don't even mention the word bureaucracy reduction anymore. People in this country are fed up with it. They can't stand to hear it anymore. Whenever someone in politics talked about reducing bureaucracy in recent years, there was a murmur in the room because the public's experience was exactly the opposite. Anyone who talked about reducing bureaucracy ended up introducing even more bureaucracy the very next day. We're changing that now, and we're changing it fundamentally. We've introduced a new ministry in the federal government, and many people were skeptical about it. And that skepticism was justified. We've already tried combining digitalization with an office before, but it couldn't be very effective. Why? because all the responsibilities were with other ministries, but not where they actually belonged. Now we have a Ministry for Digitalization and State Modernization with all the responsibilities needed to truly digitalize this country and fundamentally modernize the state. And the person who is carrying out this office, I deliberately did not choose from the ranks of politicians, but very consciously from the private sector, someone with experience in transformation, someone who knows how to digitalize, someone who knows how to manage such processes. And dear friends, that's what we've started doing. The federal cabinet has decided on a modernization campaign, and the minister-presidents of all 16 federal states. The week before last, we adopted a modernization and digitalization agenda with almost 200 different projects that will now be launched in the coming weeks, months, and years. I can tell you, by the end of this legislative period, Germany will be as digital and as modern as we have never managed to achieve in such a short time before. We have started with this, and in the coming weeks and months we will already see the evidence that things are moving forward and that Germany is becoming digital and truly modern, because for the first time, the federal government, the states, and the municipalities are in agreement on these issues regarding what we want to accomplish together. After all, and this was not easy to achieve, last Wednesday night into Thursday, we spent several hours discussing with the Social Democrats the question of what to do with the infrastructure projects. And the original plan was to limit the modernization and acceleration of approval procedures to those projects that are financed through the so-called special fund. And dear friends, it's no secret, it's been written about, that would have meant all road construction projects in Germany financed from the regular budget would have been excluded. That night I said to the Social Democrats, do you seriously believe that? We can go before the German public and say, we're now spending 500 billion euros on infrastructure. And we're continuing in the area of road construction, new builds, highways, and federal trunk roads. Exactly the same way as in recent years and decades. I gave them an example. I was out of politics for 12 years not in the Bundestag. I came back to my old constituency and took over a file about the expansion of a federal highway. In those 12 years, in the places where it was really critical, not a single meter was built further. In 12 years. I asked the Social Democrats, should I really go home and tell my constituency that we're going to continue exactly as we have in recent years? That answer was unimaginable to me. And that's why we agreed to designate the so-called overriding public interest in the planning of these projects. It will now not only be applied in individual exceptions for specific necessary replacement constructions, but will be applied comprehensively to all projects.